You believe death is the end, the final silence, the extinguishing of the light, the moment when you, as you understand yourself, simply cease to be. Humanity has feared this boundary for as long as we have been capable of fear. We have wrapped it in myth, ritual, religion, philosophy. We have tried to bargain with it, deny it, postpone it, conquer it. But when we step back and look at death through the lens of physics and cosmology, something astonishing emerges from the universe's perspective. Death is not an ending. It is a transformation. It is not annihilation. It is rearrangement. You cannot unexist. You cannot become nothing. The atoms that compose your body are nearly as old as the cosmos itself. The hydrogen within you was born in the first minutes after the Big Bang. The carbon in your cells was forged in the core of a long-dead star. The iron in your blood was created in a supernova explosion so violent it briefly outshone entire galaxies. You are not separate from this history. You are its continuation. You are matter that has taken on a temporary pattern, complex enough to think about its own origins. What we call death is not the disappearance of matter or energy. Physics forbids such disappearance. Matter and energy are conserved. They change form, they move, they reorganize, but they do not vanish. When the body dies, the pattern that sustained your biological processes can no longer maintain itself against entropy. Cells lose access to oxygen, molecular gradients collapse, chemical bonds break, microorganisms return your tissues to simpler compounds. Your atoms rejoin the biosphere. Carbon returns to the air, nitrogen to the soil, minerals to the earth and sea. Nothing is wasted. The universe is an exquisite recycler. Even while you are alive, you are not fixed. You are in constant exchange with your environment. With every breath, you inhale atoms that have been inside countless other organisms. With every meal, you incorporate matter that once belonged to plants, animals, perhaps even other humans. Over years, most of the atoms in your body are replaced. You are not a static object, but a flowing process. Death is not the first time change touches you. It is simply the moment the process can no longer sustain the organization you call self. The deeper truth is that life and death are not opposites. They are partners in a single cycle. Without death, ecosystems would freeze in stagnation. The first organisms would have consumed all available resources. Evolution would have halted. Complexity would never have emerged. The death of stars created the heavy elements that form planets and living cells. The death of organisms feeds forests, oceans, and fields. Dissolution at one scale allows creation at another. Entropy breaks down local order, but in doing so, it enables new structures to arise. Death is not a cosmic mistake. It is a cosmic mechanism. But what of consciousness? What of the inner experience, the feeling of being you? Neuroscience tells us that awareness depends on the living brain, on networks of neurons, exchanging electrical and chemical signals in intricate patterns. When that activity ceases, subjective stream appears to end. There is no solid scientific evidence that personal consciousness continues independently of a physical substrate. This is a difficult truth. We long for continuation. We crave more moments. Yet physics offers another perspective that is at least worth contemplating. In the block universe interpretation of space-time, past, present, and future are equally real. Time does not flow. It is laid out like a landscape. If this view is correct, then every moment of your life is permanently embedded in the structure of space-time. The child you once were, the adult you are now, the future version of you, all exist at their coordinates. Those moments are not erased. They are fixed features of reality. In that sense, your experiences are eternal facts of the cosmos. They cannot be undone. They cannot be removed from the tapestry of existence. Perhaps consciousness itself is an emergent property of sufficiently complex information processing. Perhaps it is even more fundamental than we currently understand. Some philosophers and physicists speculate that awareness might be woven into the fabric of reality in ways we have yet to grasp. These ideas remain speculative, but what we do know is this. Through you, the universe has become aware of itself. For billions of years, matter evolved blindly. Then, in brains like yours, it began to ask questions. It began to wonder. It began to reflect. When you die, this particular perspective closes. This window through which the cosmos observes itself goes dark, but other windows remain open. Other minds continue the exploration, the experiment of consciousness does not halt. It shifts, it redistributes, it evolves. You are not the sole bearer of awareness, but you are a unique expression of it, and uniqueness does not require permanence to have meaning. Think of yourself as a candle in a vast cosmic night. The flame does not burn forever, but while it burns, it gives light. It transforms matter into energy. It participates in the grand exchange of the universe. Your life is like that flame, finite, fragile, but luminous. The value of the flame is not measured by its duration alone, but by the illumination it provides. From the perspective of deep time, your lifespan is brief. Yet during that brief interval, atoms forged in stellar furnaces have assembled into a configuration capable of love, curiosity, grief, mathematics, music, awe. That is extraordinary. You are stardust that has learned to contemplate the stars. When the pattern dissolves, the atoms remain. They will form new patterns. They will participate in new cycles. They will perhaps become part of other living beings who will gaze upward and wonder as you once did. Nothing ends in the absolute sense. Everything transforms, patterns arise and fade, but the underlying substance persists. Death is not a void swallowing existence. It is the redistribution of matter and energy within a universe that never stands still. You were born from cosmic processes that began billions of years ago. You will return to those processes. In between, you experience, you contribute, you matter. So yes, the personal narrative concludes, the specific arrangement that calls itself I cannot resist entropy forever. But the universe does not lose what you are. It reshapes it. It continues the dance. You are not an isolated event. You are a chapter in a story that began with the Big Bang and will continue until the last stars fade into darkness. You fear death because you imagine it as erasure. Physics suggests it is transformation. You are not a thing that can be deleted. You are a temporary expression of eternal substance. Brief, yes, but real. And while you are here, the cosmos is awake in you. If we continue to follow this line of thought deeper into the fabric of reality, we begin to see that what we call an individual life is less like a possession and more like a process, less like an object and more like a wave moving through an ocean that was here long before the wave formed and will remain long after it subsides. A wave does not own the water it is made of. It does not create the ocean. It briefly expresses it in a particular shape, a particular rhythm, a particular crest, and then it returns to the larger body from which it arose without the ocean. There is no wave, but without waves, the ocean never reveals its motion, its energy, its dynamic beauty. In the same way, without the universe, you would not exist. But without beings like you, the universe would never know that it exists at all. And this changes the emotional geometry of death, because if you are a process rather than a possession, then death is not theft, it is completion. It is not something stolen from you. It is the natural closing of a cycle that began billions of years before your birth, when quantum fluctuations rippled through the early cosmos, when hydrogen clouds condensed into the first stars, when gravity sculpted galaxies, and chemistry slowly assembled molecules capable of replication in evolution. The chain that leads to you is unbroken, stretching backward through every ancestor, every organism, every stellar explosion, every atomic interaction. And when your life ends, that chain does not snap. It continues forward, branching into new forms, new organisms, new structures, new awareness. The universe is not a static sculpture. It is a flowing event, and you are one movement within it. And consider the thermodynamic truth that all ordered systems require energy flow to maintain their structure. Your body is a dissipative system, taking in low entropy energy from food and sunlight and radiating higher entropy heat into the environment. This flow maintains the delicate gradients that allow cells to function, neurons to fire, muscles to contract, thoughts to emerge. When that energy flow stops, the gradients collapse, the system relaxes into equilibrium. This is not punishment, it is physics. Every star, every hurricane, every flame, every living being follows this same principle. Structure persists only so long as energy moves through it. When the movement ceases, the structure dissolves, but the energy is not lost. It spreads outward, contributing to other processes, other structures, other flows. In this sense, death is not an interruption of the universe. It is the continuation of its most fundamental law, the constant transformation of energy from one configuration to another. And if we step even further back to the scale of cosmology, we encounter a universe whose story is written in change, Galaxies collide, stars ignite and fade, black holes merge, space-time itself expands, carrying galaxies ever farther apart. The cosmos is not built to preserve specific arrangements forever. It is built to explore possibility, to generate complexity, to unfold patterns that were implicit in its initial conditions, and then to let those patterns transform and give way to others. The death of massive stars produced the carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and iron that make biology possible without stellar death. There would be no chemistry rich enough for life without biological death. There would be no evolution, no adaptation, no novelty. The arrow of time points forward because entropy increases, but within that increase, islands of complexity arise, temporarily sustained by energy gradients, and life is one of those islands. Consciousness is one of its most intricate expressions, and you are a local peak in that rising and falling landscape of order, a temporary crest shaped by forces far older than memory and far larger than imagination. Now, when we confront the fear that accompanies death, much of it stems from identification with continuity. We assume that because our awareness flows from moment to moment, it must continue indefinitely or else be extinguished into nothingness. But continuity itself is a construct of memory, neurons encoding prior states, linking them into narrative coherence. What you call yourself is not a solid core, but a dynamic loop of information updating, integrating, predicting the future based on the past. And this loop requires metabolic support. It requires oxygen, glucose, electrochemical gradients. Once those conditions disappear, the loop cannot sustain itself. The narrative ceases, but this does not imply that reality has subtracted something from existence. It implies that a specific informational pattern has completed its trajectory. Patterns in nature constantly arise and fade. A whirlpool forms, and a river maintains its shape for a time, then disperses. The water remains, the river flows onward. The whirlpool was never an independent substance. It was a configuration, and you are such a configuration, unimaginably complex, exquisitely structured, but still a configuration of matter and energy obeying universal laws. And there is something strangely liberating in this recognition, because it dissolves the illusion that you are separate from the rest of reality. You are not an alien entity dropped into an indifferent cosmos. You are an expression of that cosmos. You are the same physics, the same chemistry, the same quantum fields arranged in a way that can ask what happens when I die. And that question itself is part of the universe exploring its own structure. And when you look at it this way, the boundary between life and death softens. It becomes less like a cliff and more like a shoreline, where one medium gradually blends into another during your life. You constantly exchange matter with the environment. Atoms enter and leave your body every second. The air you inhale was exhaled by forests, oceans. Other people, the water in your cells once moved through clouds, glaciers, rivers, dinosaurs. The carbon in your DNA may have resided in ancient plants, in prehistoric animals, in microbial mats, beneath primordial seas. You are already a mosaic assembled from countless prior lives, and when you die, that mosaic disperses, contributing to future assemblies. This is not poetic metaphor. It is biogeochemical cycling, the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the phosphorus cycle, the grand planetary circulation of elements. And so your death is participation in a planetary process, billions of years old and billions of years ongoing. And if we widen our scope further to the ultimate fate of the cosmos, current models suggest that the universe will continue expanding. Stars will exhaust their nuclear fuel. Galaxies will grow dark. Black holes will slowly evaporate through Hawking radiation, and entropy will approach a maximum state, often described as heat death, a thin, cold, diffuse equilibrium where no free energy remains to power complexity. But even this far future is transformation, not annihilation. The particles will persist. Space-time will persist. Quantum fields will persist in some form. The story will change its tempo, but the fundamental existence of reality will not blink out in a metaphysical sense. It will settle into a different state. And so when we say nothing ends, everything transforms. We are speaking in alignment with the deepest principles. We know: mass energy, conservation, quantum field, persistence, thermodynamic evolution. And within this vast temporal arc, your life is brief, but not trivial, because meaning is not measured solely by duration. A supernova lasts weeks, yet forges the elements of life. A lightning strike lasts milliseconds, yet reshapes a forest. A human lifetime lasts decades, yet can alter the trajectory of ideas, culture, knowledge, and even the physical environment. Your thoughts, your actions, your relationships propagate outward through causal chains, influencing others who influence others. In turn, information spreads through networks, leaving traces long after the originating brain has ceased to function. Books, conversations, acts of kindness, discoveries, creative works, even subtle behavioral shifts ripple through social systems, and these ripples are as real as gravitational waves traveling through space-time. They carry the imprint of your existence into futures you will never witness, but which nevertheless unfold partly because you were here, and this reframes the question of immortality. Perhaps immortality was never about preserving the same pattern indefinitely. Perhaps it is about participation in an ongoing process larger than any single configuration. You are not immortal as a static self, but you are immortal as contribution, as influence, as matter, as energy, as part of the causal fabric of the cosmos. You cannot retroactively not have existed. Once you have been here, your existence is a permanent feature of space-time. Nothing can erase the fact that at these coordinates in the four-dimensional manifold, there was a conscious being thinking, feeling, perceiving the universe. That fact is woven into the structure of reality as unchangeably as the curvature around a star. And even if consciousness is entirely dependent on neural activity, even if personal awareness ends definitively at brain death, the existence of those conscious moments remains part of the universal record. And there is another layer to consider: the evolutionary context of fear. Our ancestors who feared death tended to survive longer and reproduce more successfully. Fear is adaptive. It motivates caution, protection, cooperation, avoidance of danger. But evolution optimizes for reproductive success, not for metaphysical accuracy. The fear of death does not necessarily reveal the ultimate nature of death. It reveals the survival pressures of small primates on a dangerous planet. Understanding this allows a degree of detachment. We can acknowledge fear as a biological signal without mistaking it for a cosmic verdict, and through scientific insight, we gain the ability to reinterpret that signal, to see death not as cosmic betrayal, but as ecological necessity and physical inevitability woven into the same laws that allowed our existence in the first place. And when we contemplate our mortality from this vantage point, something shifts. Urgency sharpens, appreciation deepens. Because if patterns are temporary, then the present configuration is precious, not because it will last, but because it will not. Every experience, every conversation, every sunrise, every act of understanding is a fleeting alignment of atoms that will never recur in exactly the same way. The improbability of your specific arrangement is staggering. Trillions of interactions across billions of years converge to produce this moment of awareness, reading these words, that improbability does not diminish when it ends. It remains an extraordinary fact about the universe that for a time matter assembled into you and you perceived and questioned and loved and wondered, and that's not erased by transformation. It is completed by it, and perhaps the most profound shift comes when we recognize that death has been operating continuously since the dawn of life-shaping adaptation, selecting variation, clearing space for novelty. Without it, there would be no diversity, no complexity, no humans contemplating cosmology. You owe your existence to unbroken chains of birth and death extending back nearly 4 billion years. Every ancestor who ever lived eventually died, making room for the next generation. Their dissolution is the precondition of your presence, and in turn, your dissolution will enable futures beyond your imagination. This is not a diminishment. It is participation in an ancient relay where no runner carries the baton forever. Yet, the race continues and grows more intricate with each passing epoch. And so when we speak of being eternal from the universe's perspective, we do not mean preserving ego or memory unchanged. We mean belonging to a system where nothing fundamental is lost, where substance persists, where influence propagates, where space-time retains every event, where transformation is the only constant. You were present in the early universe as hydrogen. You were present in stellar cores as fusion. You were present in supernova debris as expanding clouds. You were present in planetary accretion in oceans and microbial life in forests and animals, and now you are present as reflective consciousness. Someday you will be present in soil, in air, in other organisms, perhaps even in future minds that contemplate similar questions. And through all these phases, the underlying reality continues its dance fields, interacting particles, exchanging energy structures, forming, dissolving, reforming without final termination. And if there is a lesson here, it may be this: do not confuse change with negation. Do not mistake transformation for oblivion. You are not a static entity threatened by time. You are time expressed locally. You are the universe in motion, experiencing one of its innumerable configurations. And when that configuration shifts, the motion does not stop. It simply flows onward in new forms, new relationships, new complexities. And in that flowing, there is continuity, not of identity, but of existence itself. And that continuity is vast beyond measure, stretching from the first flicker of cosmic inflation to futures trillions of years hence. You are woven into that expanse, inseparable from it, never outside it, never truly lost within it. And so death viewed through physics is not the erasure of being, but the redistribution of structure, not the end of matter, but its reorganization, not the defeat of life, but the mechanism that allows life to persist and evolve. And in understanding this, we may not eliminate sorrow, for we are emotional creatures bonded to specific forms and faces and narratives, but we can temper fear with perspective. We can see our finitude as a feature of a dynamic cosmos rather than a flaw in its design. We can live more fully, knowing that while the pattern is temporary, the participation is eternal, and that in this very moment, as atoms forged in ancient stars assemble into awareness, the universe is awake in you, contemplating its own impermanence, and finding within that impermanence not despair, but the endless unfolding of transformation that has no absolute beginning and no final end, only change without cessation, woven into the very fabric of reality itself. And if we allow our minds to travel even further into this realization, we begin to understand that what gives death its sharpness is not the physics of dissolution, but the psychology of attachment. We attach to continuity, to identity, to the familiar arrangement of memories and sensations that we call self, yet identity itself is fluid. Neuroscience shows us that the brain is in constant flux. Synapses strengthen and weaken, neurons rewire, proteins degrade and are replaced. The person you were 10 years ago is not physically the same organism reading these words now, and yet there is a thread of narrative continuity that creates the illusion of solidity. Death is the final transformation in a series of transformations that have been happening all along. The difference is magnitude, not kind. We grieve because relationships are patterns, two shared neural representations, mirrored emotions, synchronized rhythms between bodies, and when one partner in that synchronization ceases the pattern, changes abruptly, the loss is real at the experiential level, but at the physical level, the interactions continue in altered forms, memories stored in surviving brains, behaviors influenced by prior bonds, cultural traces embedded in language and action. The universe does not revert to a state as though you never existed. Every interaction leaves a mark. However, subtle causality does not permit erasure. And so your existence permanently alters the trajectory of reality in ways both measurable and immeasurable. And consider the quantum perspective, where particles are excitations of underlying fields. The electron is not a tiny marble, but a vibration in an electron field that extends throughout the cosmos. The photon is a ripple in the electromagnetic field which pervades all space if everything is fundamentally field. Then what you call your body is a complex choreography of excitations, patterns of vibration, stabilized temporarily by forces and boundary conditions. Death in this frame is the relaxation of a specific choreography, but the fields remain, the potential for new excitations remains, the capacity for pattern remains. Nothing fundamental disappears, only configurations shift. And this perspective dissolves the notion of absolute isolation. Because if the fields are continuous, then separation is contextual, not ultimate. Your atoms are not sealed off from the cosmos. They are local expressions of universal substrates, and when those local expressions reorganize, they remain expressions of the same underlying reality. The fear of nothingness often arises from imagining a blank void, an infinite absence, but physics does not describe such a void. Even empty space seethes with quantum fluctuations, virtual particles, appearing and vanishing energy fields fluctuating at microscopic scales. The vacuum is not nothing. It is a dynamic plenum structured by laws and constants and symmetries. And so the cosmos is never empty in the metaphysical sense. It is always something in motion, always structured, always governed by relationships and proportions. And if your personal awareness ceases, it does not fall into nothing. It simply does not continue as that particular process. The universe remains full, vibrant, active, unfolding without interruption. And when we meditate on deep time, billions of years before your birth, billions after your death, the vast majority of cosmic history does not contain you as a conscious being. Yet you do not experience distress about the time before your birth. You do not mourn the centuries. You do not witness the universe unfolded without your awareness, and it will continue to unfold without it. The symmetry between prenatal non-existence and post-mortem non-existence suggests that the fear we project forward is largely narrative. We imagine losing something because we currently possess it, but from a broader temporal vantage point, your conscious interval is a bright segment embedded within an enormous continuum. And that segment does not need to stretch infinitely to be complete. It needs only to occur, and it has occurred and is occurring and will have occurred as long as space-time exists. And there is also the ethical dimension. Awareness of mortality sharpens responsibility. If patterns are temporary, then the quality of this pattern matters. How you treat others, how you contribute to knowledge, how you steward the environment. These choices influence future configurations. Death does not negate responsibility. It intensifies it because opportunities are finite, and finite opportunities demand intention. The atoms you borrow will be returned, but the arrangements you create while you borrow them can ease suffering, increase understanding, amplify beauty. These are not trivial ripples. They are structural influences within complex adaptive systems, and complexity theory teaches us that small perturbations can cascade into large-scale effects, nonlinear dynamics, sensitive dependence on initial conditions, the so-called butterfly effect implies that no action is entirely isolated. Your kindness today may alter decisions decades from now in ways you cannot trace, but which nonetheless emerge from causal chains you helped initiate. In this sense, your finitude coexists with profound agency. You are temporary, yet impactful, local, yet connected. And when we consider future intelligence, perhaps biological, perhaps artificial, perhaps forms beyond current imagination, we can see ourselves as early participants in a much longer arc of awakening. The universe has only recently, in cosmic terms, begun to reflect upon itself. Consciousness may expand, diversify, integrate with technologies, explore other planets, reshape environments. And you are part of that early chapter. Your curiosity, your science, your art, your moral deliberations contribute to the foundation upon which later minds will build. You will not witness those distant eras, but your existence forms part of their prehistory. And this continuity of contribution is a kind of temporal bridge linking finite lives into an ongoing tapestry. And so when death approaches, whether suddenly or gradually, it is not the arrival of a cosmic eraser. It is the closing of a particular chapter within an unending manuscript. The ink does not vanish. The language does not collapse. The narrative continues incorporating what came before, transforming it, integrating it into new passages. And if there is solace to be found, it may lie not in promises of perpetual personal awareness, but in recognition of inseparability. You have never been separate from the universe, not at birth, not in life, not in death. You are a mode of its existence, a gesture in its unfolding, a momentary self-reflection within an immense and ancient process. And when that gesture subsides, the process does not falter. It flows onward, carrying within it the fact that you were here, that for a time atoms assembled into a being who asked what it means to end and discovered that ending in the cosmic. Sense is indistinguishable from transformation, that the fear of oblivion softens when seen against conservation laws, that the boundary between life and death is a gradient, not an abyss, and that in the vast arithmetic of existence, nothing is subtracted, only rearranged. And so the story does not conclude with silence, but with continuation, not of the same melody, but of the symphony itself, ever evolving, ever transforming, without final cessation, woven into the eternal dynamism of reality, where being and becoming are two names for the same ceaseless dance.